home, I have my treasurer, Douglas Mwonzora, from the MDC. Douglas Mwonzora. Yes, treasurer, good evening and welcome, special welcome to you. And then Paul Mangwana, Paul Mangwana. Paul Mangwana. Yes, Paul. Welcome, Paul. Welcome. The significance of our three panelists is less about the fact that they may represent certain persuasions, certain political affiliations in Zimbabwe, than the fact that they are among our leading lawyers in our country, jurists in their own right. And the three of them were involved in the COPAC, the constitution-making exercise in 2013. And even though they came from different parties, they worked remarkably well to produce that constitution. So the belief that Zimbabweans are divided by political affiliation is far from true. Certainly not in the case of such professionals and such bright lawyers as we have before us. Then I'll introduce our discussants, Chipo Dendere. Chipo, our young academic professor of political science out in the US with their baby there. Welcome, Chipo. Chipo is one of our discussants. Then Brian Kagoro, another Brian. Kagoro, Brian, another luminary and an old hand in the civic movement in Zimbabwe. An important figure, continues to be, and we rely on him immensely in such discussions. Last for this time round, but not by far the least, Thuli Madonsela, my dear sister. Welcome to Zimbabwe. Thuli, we want to see you. Thuli. She's not there. Hello, Thuli. Welcome. Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay. So let's go back to Alex. Would like to start? 3 minutes introduction of the topic. Just 3 minutes, a summary.
You need to unmute me. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much also for convening this very important platform. I welcome all my colleagues who are on the platform. The issue of recalls from Parliament is a fundamental issue that lies at the heart of our democratic system, or at least a system that is trying hard to be democratic. For me, democratic legitimacy is at the heart of any democratic system. And democratic legitimacy is based on the principle of consent. In other words, those who are governed must give, must show, must demonstrate their consent to those who govern them. And this is done through the process of an election. In other words, every 5 years, people go to an election and they choose their leaders. Now, the idea is that those who sit in parliament and those who are in the executive are persons who have been chosen by the people, people to whom consent has been granted by the governed. So it also means that the removal of those who have been chosen by the people should also repose in the hands of the people who make those decisions. The recall clause, which we have in our Constitution, Section 129, subsection 1, paragraph K, is one that sits uncomfortably with the idea of democratic consent, or at least it has been made to sit uncomfortably with the principle of democratic consent. The reason I say so is that it awards the power to remove democratically elected representatives of the people in the hands of a political party. Now I say so, and I hold up my hands as one of those who sat in COPAC prior to 2013 and agreed that this clause should be in the Constitution. But I also want to make the point that it was not an invention of COPAC, as I hope my two colleagues who who sat with me in those committees will agree. This is a clause that originates from the late 1980s. In fact, it might rightly be called the Tekere clause, because it was introduced as a way of responding to the expulsion of Edgar Tekere, a veteran nationalist who was a member of ZANU-PF, who had been expelled from the party. But then
Alex, I have to stop you now. I'll bring you back. Let's move to Douglas Mwonzora. 3 minutes, initially 3 minutes, please. Tejara Mwonzora. Unmute yourself, Tejara. Unmute.
Thank you. You hear me?
Just 3 minutes in the first instance. I'll come back to you. Just 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. My appreciation of this topic is very, very simple. It's a very simple topic. First of all, the recalls that have happened in Zimbabwe in the context of recalls from Parliament happening after the Supreme Court decision, are they constitutional? That's number one. Number two, do they offend democratic principles? Number three, do they pose a danger to the political settlement, whatever political settlement that people are thinking about? And I need to dispense with the first issue very, very simply. As Alex Magaisa rightly pointed out, in terms of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, we have 3 sections that deal with recall. The first section is section 129(1)K of the Constitution, and it says that a party can recall a person who has ceased to belong to it. And that person must have been a member of that party at the time of the election. That's number one. Clause number 2 is section 129(1)L. And this deals with a person who enters parliament as an independent and then joins a political party. This is what we famously call the Jonathan Moyo clause. The third clause is clause 278 that deals with the recall of members of parliament. Now, the very simple issue there is that a very simple fact is that recalls are provided for by the law of the land. They are provided for by the constitution of the country. And there was a reason why there was a recall clause. Recall clauses are there, and they are a common feature of many constitutions in the world. They are not a Zimbabwean invention only. You find them in other countries, in other democracies, and people are recalled because they've ceased to belong to a political party to which they belonged at the time of the election. And the assumption is that when the people voted, they had an idea of the identity of the political party to which the MP or councillor belonged. And they associated the MP and the councillor with that political party. And if the councillor and the political party cease to belong, of that political party cease to belong to it, then they can be recalled. That is the justification.
Thank you, Tejara. Thanks a lot. We'll come back to you. Paul Mangwana. Yes, Paul? Paul, just 3 minutes in the first instance. Unmute yourself. Unmute. Unmute.
Technology fails him.
Okay. So, okay,
So
yeah, welcome.
The basis of the recall clause is from the fact that what is elected into parliament, what is given a mandate to rule the country is a political party. It is not individuals. It is political parties which sponsor candidates to parliament. People elect a candidate on the basis of the political party to which he or she belongs, and because they agree with the policies of that political party. So when you are in parliament, you are representing the interests of the political party. When the constituents voted for you, they voted for you on the basis of the political party to which you belong. So if you cease to represent the philosophy, the ideology, the program of that political party, then the political party has a right to withdraw you. So that if you continue to say, my constituents is in agreement with my views, you have a right to contest in a by-election as an independent. So it does not take away your right to contest now on your own without the blessing of the political party. So in order for democracy to be tested as to whether or not your views are in line with the thinking of the constituents, a by-election is then called. You are free to go and contest and put up your program as an independent. And if you so win, then the constituency is in agreement with you. If you don't succeed, then it means that the constituency is not in agreement with you. So we are giving the people an opportunity to test as to whether your views are in line with the thinking of the constituents or of the political party. So the political party is saying, you no longer represent our philosophy, our ideology, our thinking, and let us test as to whether your views are in line with the thinking of the constituents. So a by-election is called, and you can contest it.
We'll come back to you, Paul. Back to our discussions, a minute and a half each. Chipo, your appreciation of this topic, and we'll come back to you more substantively later. Chipo? Unmute yourself.
So I think this is quite interesting, but at the heart of the Zimbabwean crisis since independence is this dual coexistence of, on one hand, you have constitutionalism and legalism, but on the other hand, you have a complete abuse of paralegal structures by the ruling party and now by the MDC TT Coupe faction. So the problem in Zimbabwe has never been about understanding the law. Clearly, 3/4 of the people in our country are lawyers, but the real problem in Zimbabwe is the application of the law. And so what we see in this case is that the ruling party and the other opposition party are abusing, right? They're abusing the constitution to push forward their goals and agendas. And this has been happening even before independence. So what happened after independence is that ZANU-PF just took over another arsenal in their toolbox. And that arsenal is called, lying via the constitution, if you will. And I think my minute is up.
Thanks. The babies want to speak too. Brian Kagoro? Just a minute and a half in the first instance. Brian? Brian?
Thank you so much, Savage Trust, for this invitation. Let me say that there is a misunderstanding of constitutionalism in some of the things that I've heard said. The right to recall in our constitution is a hereditary practice borrowed from an archaic British practice. And the British themselves in 2015, as Alex Magaisa will tell you, realized two things: that there was no mechanism for doing a recall. So they passed an entire act to regulate how recalls would happen. So in British constitutional practice, recalls can be done by voters directly. So you have to show in constituencies that at least 10% of the voters that elected a parliamentarian want to recall. It's a performance-related recall. The second was a legality or crime-related recall, where a member of parliament is convicted of an offense. The third was a floor-crossing related recall, where a member of parliament ceased to be a member of a political party that they represent. So the fundamental question in Zimbabwe is, what is the democratic process or procedure within a political party that must be complied with before a recall is undertaken? A mere letter to the speaker does not meet the spirit of the Constitution as articulated in section 117, and does not meet the spirit, because the Constitution assumes that legislative authority is conferred by the people. So it's important that we realize that the provision in the Zimbabwean Constitution has not ever really been fully complied with, because it has to be read with other provisions in the Constitution that talk about fair hearing before a decision is made that fundamentally affects one's rights or legitimate expectation. But number two...
We'll come back to you.
All right.
Tuli, welcome, Tuli. Tuli. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Tuli. Unmute.
Thank you for this privilege. Just firstly to indicate that I am not Zimbabwean. I enter this dialogue on the basis of a democratic internationalism, also an understanding that Zimbabwe is part of SADC, and therefore what happens in Zimbabwe impacts the SADC ecosystem and the African ecosystem. My view is that any country that wishes to recall parliament or to alter the democratic landscape beyond the elections has to comply with the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, etc. We must also understand that 2020 was supposed to be the final year on the silencing of the guns in Africa. And part of silencing the guns in Africa is democratic governance that is anchored in the rule of law. So it's not enough that a country would comply with the letter of its constitution. It must comply with the spirit of democracy. And that is embodied in the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and related matters. And I do think that what has happened in the country right now does not only create instability in the country, it creates instability in the region. And I'm concerned that unlike COMESA, that jumped to try and solve the problem when there was a problem in Cote d'Ivoire, SADC leaders are taking their time in intervening in Zimbabwe. And there's an American native saying that says, if you don't fix the hem of your dress, you will soon be without a dress. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuli. Thank you very much. And welcome again. We brought you, and I think you're really assisting us by drawing on the charter, the African Charter for Human Rights. I think it's very important. We'll come back to you. So now, I now invite Alex Magaisa to make his substantive presentation. Alex.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now. Okay, excellent. Right. So some of the issues have already been touched on by my co-panelists and the discussants. But I want to focus specifically on section 129, subsection 1, paragraph K of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which says that an MP who ceases to belong to the political party to which he was a member when he was elected can be recalled by that political party when that political party sends a written notice to the Speaker of the National Assembly or the President of the Senate. Now, this looks very simple, but there has to be detail to it. You cannot just apply this provision in the way that we have done it, especially in the last 7 years, without the detail of how that takes place. I think Brian Kagoro has already alluded to the fact that there is need for specific detail on how the democratic process of carrying out this process should be handled. Unfortunately, we don't have it. And so far, we've only been guided by decisions of the Constitutional Court. And with all due respect, I think those decisions of the Constitutional Court leave a lot to be desired in terms of our understanding of the democratic process. I've already made an allusion to the fact that democratic legitimacy is based on consent, and that consent comes from the people, which therefore means that removal of an MP should also involve the people. What I would wish for Zimbabwe is that there would be an act of parliament which specifically provides for the processes that need to be undertaken for the realization of Section 129, subsection 1, paragraph K. The issue of when an MP is removed is itself a factual inquiry. You have to ask a number of questions, including, number one, has that MP really ceased to be a member of that political party? The next question would be, which political party has the right to carry out that process, to write that written notice to the Speaker of Parliament as well as to the President of the Senate? Then you've got to ask another question, was he a member of that party? And finally, you have to ask the question whether the political party that is entitled to write to the Speaker of Parliament and to the President of the Senate is actually the one that has done so. As I said, these are factual questions. These are factual questions that require a factual inquiry, because you may have a situation where two political parties lay claim to an MP. Someone has to make that decision. So far, the decisions that we have seen from our Constitutional Court proceed on the assumption that the right political party is the party that is written to the Speaker of Parliament, and the Speaker of Parliament has no role whatsoever except to simply accept that written notice and proceed to announce that the MP has been recalled. But as we have seen, this has brought a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, with MPs themselves challenging that recall process. So this brings us to the issue that Brian has already alluded to, which is the question of a fair hearing. Now, our Constitution in Section 69, subsection 3, provides for the right to a fair hearing, that any person, any Zimbabwean is entitled to have access to a court of law for the adjudication and resolution of any dispute that he may have pertaining to their rights. Now, we see that MPs who have challenged their recall, those processes are still ongoing. Those processes have been ongoing, but even as they have been ongoing, we have also seen that the other processes, for example, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission then calls up and says, now we have vacancies that have arisen, and we have a duty in terms of the law to fill those vacancies. And they have proceeded to do so prior to the resolution of the dispute that has been raised by that MP. Now, in my opinion, there is a fundamental problem there, because our electoral law is in conflict with the rights to a fair hearing, with the rights to fair administrative conduct, which is also in Section 69 of the Constitution. What we have seen is that the Speaker and the President of the Senate have accepted what they believe to be the right letter that has come from the right political party, and they pretend that they have not engaged in any factual inquiry, that they are simply accepting a letter. But the reality is that once there is someone who is making a claim, a contrary claim, then the Speaker and the President of the Senate are being called upon to play a quasi-judicial role in which they must conduct an inquiry as to whether or not this is the correct party which is sending the letter. And if so, they must be able to afford the other parties a fair hearing. In other words, Parliament itself could have set up its own processes to carry out this process, but they have not done so. And they have proceeded on the basis that what they have received is the correct letter from the correct political party. In my opinion, there is an anomaly in that regard, which has resulted in the challenges that we now have. So I just want to go as I conclude with my presentation, which is that constitution makers do not intend, never intend to create absurdities in the law. It is absurd that you have a party or you have a process for the replacement of an MP who is challenging his recall. But that process is almost made redundant because the other process of replacing him or her continue regardless. So we have a situation right now where ZEC can actually confirm that these MPs who were affected by the recalls in the current moment have lost their seats, but their disputes have not been resolved. I do not think that constitution makers, I do not think that the legislature would have legislated for such an absurdity. That something can be done and concluded while the process of resolving that dispute is continuing. I also do not think that legislators would have envisaged an absurd situation in which the representatives of the people are recalled and then their replacements come without any consultation whatsoever. Coming from a situation such as we have right now, where people who contested an election against those candidates who have been recalled are now brought back by the back door to become MPs of the same people who rejected them. I do not think that the legislature, constitution makers would have envisaged such an absurdity because it is not in line with the principle of democratic legitimacy. As I said, you cannot talk about recalls without talking about how the replacement takes place. And what we are now seeing is the situation where the replacements are coming in. They are coming in as a result of selection by a small group of people, which is very elitist. And the reason why people are questioning this whole process is because the people in those constituencies, people in those provinces have not been consulted. People who voted for their MPs have not been consulted. In fact, to wrap up, there are a number of issues, Dr. Mandaza, which we need to really interrogate in this whole process. And I start by saying that none of the political parties in Zimbabwe at the moment, and by this I refer to ZANU-PF, I refer to MDC-T, led by Dr. Kupe, I refer to the MDC Alliance, led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa. Each one of them has exercised the right of recall. And they have exercised the right of recall in a manner that I do not believe is democratic. So we have to start from there. This is not an accusation that one party is better than the other. It is a situation about a system that is being applied in a manner that does not accord to the principle of democratic legitimacy. So that's number one. Number two, it is about the right to fair representation, the right of the electorate to choose their own leaders, so that the people, Brian has mentioned the British system, I was going to make reference to it, but I don't need to repeat it. The way that it operates is that the electorate is consulted. The electorate has a say in the process of recalling their MPs. We don't have that because we don't have an act of parliament that makes provision for that. Our system privileges the political party, as Mr. Mangwana has pointed out, at the expense of the people who elected those people. I think that this can be resolved very easily by having an act of parliament that regulates the process of recalling MPs. So that it's not just left in the hands of the political party, but it's also given to the people. A point that has also been made by Professor Mwonzora in relation to the African Charter on elections and other matters. What we have also seen, by way of conclusion, Dr. Mandaza, is that all the political parties in Zimbabwe have abused the recall provision. They have abused the recall provision in order to settle political scores. Someone that has probably said or done things that the party does not like. Because of course the system privileges the political party and not the people. Without even consulting the people, they go on and recall people. But not only that, they go on and impose people of their own liking to become the replacements to that. In my opinion, this system lacks democratic legitimacy. I conclude on that note.
Thanks very much, Alex. I think you have outlined everything. So I'll now move to Douglas Mwonzora, and perhaps in addition to whatever reactions you have to Alex's submission, would you consider that the current recall of parliamentarians is in effect an assault not only on the Constitution, but on the democratic principles, in particular, the rights of the voter? Douglas Mwonzora.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank Alex for his arguments. I want to start by saying that with all due respect, Alex is wrong. We are not in COPAC 2. We are not about to change the constitution. We are not making a new constitution. We have a constitution that exists. We have a constitution that is there. It is there in black and white. And this is not the first time that recalls have taken place. Sometime, I've forgotten the year, Morgan Tsvangirai, who was in the same party with Tendai Biti and Alex Magaisa and myself, recalled the entire Chitungwiza councillors on the basis that what they had done had ceased to accord with the principles of the party. We recalled them. And it was all right. And my friend Magaisa didn't raise an issue on that. After the rebellion by Tendai Biti and Company, Morgan Tsvangirai, myself, and Alex Magaisa was a member of that party. We recalled 21 members of parliament on the basis that they had ceased to belong to the MDCT. In May 2018, Nelson Chamisa, in his capacity as the president of the MDCT, recalled Thokozani Kupe from parliament on the basis that Thokozani Kupe had ceased to belong to the MDCT. After the Supreme Court ruling, we have recalled members of parliament. Now, we don't change laws, we don't change attitudes because the people who are being recalled are our friends or are our comrades. The law is the law. Now, the question is, in recalling these people, did the MDC behave in accordance with the law? I already said Section 129 of the Constitution provides for instances where a party can recall members of parliament. And it is that section that we used. And when we used that section, we were challenged both at parliament and in the courts of law. We succeeded in the court of law. We were adjudged to be right. And there is a section that deals with councillors, Section 278. We followed that section and we went on to recall, just as we had done before. ZANU-PF has recalled its members of parliament as well, and so on. Now, in terms of the MDC constitution, and again, I go to Alex there. He is talking about the issue of fair hearing and so on. His assumption is that the constitution of the MDC was not followed. In terms of the constitution of the MDC, if you cease to belong to the MDCT, if you form another political party other than the MDCT, the termination of your membership is automatic. And this is a very, very clear and short clause in the Constitution. If you form another political party, or if you cease to belong to the MDCT, your termination is automatic. In other words, you terminate your membership yourself. These MPs, these councillors have recalled themselves by joining another political party. How did we know? Whether wisely or unwisely, What the MDC alliance people went on to do after the Supreme Court judgment was to produce massively affidavits. And these affidavits were to the effect to be signed by the elected officials, including the MPs. These affidavits were to the effect that they had ceased to belong to the MDCT and that they were now members of the MDC Alliance Party. Now, in court documents, some of the MPs went on to say that they had ceased to belong to the MDCT. Or they seemed to have been oblivious of Section 510A of the MDC Constitution, which says that if you cease to belong to the MDCT, if you form another political party or belong to another political party, you automatically terminate your membership. So it was their fault. And these are people who should have known better. We are talking of people who were secretary generals of the party, people who had access to legal services. Now, the question that Alex has asked, did these people belong to the MDCT or to the MDC Alliance? On the 5th of August, 2017, Morgan Tsvangirai and 6 political leaders concluded and signed an alliance agreement. This alliance agreement was concluded and signed at the Zimbabwe grounds. And this alliance agreement is in 2 parts. The first one, it is a non-compete pre-election pact. The second part is that it is a post-election coalition. In other words, if we had won the elections, we would have formed a coalition government. Now, you don't form a coalition government with the people of the same party. You form a coalition government with the people of different parties. So that was the nature of the alliance agreement. It was the constitutive agreement. It was the constitutive document.
Can I come in? The question which is being asked out there is why is the MDCT recalling parliamentarians? Is it to do with the constitution or is it politics at play? Before you come back to that, I will just ask Alex to come in with some of the issues you raised yourself. Alex? Alex? Unmute yourself, Alex. Unmute yourself.
Right.
Unmute yourself.
Yes, yes, I have. Yes, I have. Thank you very much. Look, I don't want to take a lot of time because we've got many people who I think have got very brilliant ideas. I just wanted to pose 2 simple questions to my brother, Mr. Mwonzora. When I say that the clause has been abused because of weaponization of the law, he says that MDC Alliance members who have chosen to declare their allegiance to the MDC Alliance automatically expelled themselves from the MDCT. My question is, why then has it taken the MDCT to act in stages, recalling 6 MPs there, recalling 7 MPs there, recalling a few councillors here, a few councillors there? Do they not know that all these MPs and all these councillors, because they are members of the MDC Alliance, have chosen to align themselves with the MDC Alliance? Why are they doing it in stages? They are doing it in stages because it's political. And this is why I'm saying that it's the weaponization of the law. They could easily have gone to the Speaker of Parliament and to the President of the Senate and to the Minister of Local Government and said all these MPs and councillors who belong to the MDC Alliance have ceased to become members of the MDCT by virtue of their allegiance to the MDC Alliance, and therefore we are now recalling them. But instead they are doing so in a very staged process, which is part of what I refer to as the weaponization and abuse of the law. Second is the issue of what he talks about, the MDC Alliance constitutive document. That is an internal matter within the MDC Alliance itself. The Speaker of Parliament does not have a quasi-judicial role. But if he accepts that the Speaker of Parliament has a quasi-judicial role to carry out a factual inquiry into the internal matters of a party, then of course, it changes the whole argument, because it says that these MPs should have been given a fair hearing by the speaker before they were recalled. But he did not do that. He simply accepted what he had been given by the MDCT in order to...
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Alex.
Okay.
Tejara, Mwonzora, you want to respond quickly before I move to Mangwana? Unmute yourself. Yes. Unmute yourself.
Yes. Now, Alex...
Very briefly, Tejara.
Very briefly, Alex makes a point that these MPs are being recalled in stages. Yes, because we are dealing with these people on a case-by-case basis. We rely on evidence that is before us. And before we get that evidence, we cannot just recall people. So we recalled people on the basis of the evidence as it manifested itself. We looked at this on a case-by-case basis. You will find that those who were recalled first have documents which they signed before the courts of law. But what is important is that the MDC Alliance has a constitutive document, which is not a private document. It is a public document, the MDC Alliance Agreement, that nobody wants to talk about. And that Alliance Agreement says that it is a pre-election pact, it is a post-election coalition agreement. It goes on to say that each political party retains its individual identity and autonomy. That is Section 2. Section 3 goes on to say that each political party will be given a quota of MPs or councillors to fill under the alliance. And then it goes to say in clause 4.1.7 that each of the political parties has the right to recall its members of parliament. So the MDC Alliance was not a political party in the conventional sense. It was a group of political parties. So round number one, these MPs belonged to the MDCT at the time of the election. Round number two, they ceased to belong to the MDCT. Now, Alex says also that
Robert, I've lost this guy.
The MDC Alliance, the MDC Alliance as opposed to the MDC Alliance Party. He should have listened to David Coltart. David Coltart said in one of his tweets that the MDC Alliance had been formed as a political party in May 2019. And then in 2020, we had the MDC Alliance producing a constitution in June of 2020. If we go by what Coltart says, then the MDC Alliance Party did not compete in the elections because it was formed at Guero, according to David Coltart. And if we go by its constitution produced in 2020, it was formed in 2020. These MPs belonged to the MDCT. They were subjected to due process in terms of the constitution of the MDC.
We'll come back to you. I think it's less about parties than about the right of the voter that we were trying to look at. I'll now turn to Paul Mangwana, and I'm not asking Paul to be a referee between the MDCT and the MDC Alliance, but also as a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, that to reflect on some of the points raised by participants on this conversation. One, that since political parties are essentially undemocratic, inherently undemocratic, how can therefore political parties have primacy over voters that's one question. The other one, of course, is the second question is the role of the speaker. I think Alex made a lot of emphasis on the role of the speaker in providing a fair hearing to those who are being recalled. That instead, what we have seen is haste, utmost haste, almost to preempt not only the fair hearing, but to preempt anything that might upset the recall of the parliament. So I'll ask you to comment, both as a constitutional lawyer in your own right, but also as a politician, of course.
I think let me start by underscoring one fact we are losing, that the population elects a political party into parliament, then the political party is represented by representatives. So ZANU-PF is the one which is elected into parliament. It fields a person to represent its interests in parliament. That is the fundamental basis on which the recall clause is based. So the political party is saying, you are elected into parliament to promote the interests of the party. You are elected into parliament so that you put into effect the manifesto of the party which sponsored you into parliament. You no longer represent the interests of that political party which fielded you into parliament to promote its interests, and we are recalling you. This is the fundamental basis on which the recall clause is based. If you want to represent yourself and your interests in parliament, our constitution allows you to field yourself as an independent. But once you have agreed to belong to a political party, to be fielded as a candidate by that political party, you are also losing your right to independent views. You must then promote the views of the political party which has sponsored you. That is the fundamental basis on which the recall clause is based. That is why it is important for the political party to produce a certificate to the speaker that we are now withdrawing our right to be represented by this particular MP in parliament, because that particular MP is no longer representing the interests of the political party which is sponsored him into parliament. So as long as we have political party democracy, or the basis of representation being you are representing a political party which sponsors you, then the recall clause is important, because you cannot then go into parliament and start debating and arguing against the fundamental principles of the political party which sent you to parliament. But the mandate to rule the country is then given to a political party with a majority of representatives in parliament. If a political party does not raise enough members of parliament to form a majority in parliament, it will not be able to pass any bills, it will not be able to push its policies and principles through into implementation, because it does not have the requisite numbers. So the political party must make sure that it has got representatives who initiate and promote the policies on which that political party was elected by the electorate into parliament. I think let us not lose that fundamental fact that the population will be saying, we want this political party to form a government. That political party can only form a government if it has got a majority of members of parliament. So if those members of parliament are not subscribing to the ideology, to the principles of the political party, then they do not represent the interests of that political party, and it will lose its right to rule. At the next election, it will lose the election, because its mandate, in fact, its policies have no one to promote in parliament. And that is the...
But Paul, would you agree? Paul, would you agree that there's an inherent contradiction or tension between the primacy of the party on the one hand and the right of the voter on the other? Would you agree that this is a tension which needs to be resolved?
No, the voter chooses a political party. Let us understand that. The voter, while you have the name of the member of parliament in the ballot box, but you also have the political party which he represents. So the same member of parliament, if I leave ZANU-PF today, members of ZANU-PF will decide as to whether they want to continue to support me or not. But I cannot go away with the electorate on my own when I decide to be an independent or I decide to join MDC. That is why a by-election has to be held so that the electorate can decide as to whether on my own I still represent the interests of the electorate. Because the electorate has a right to be represented in parliament, to be governed by a political party. In Zimbabwe, we have what we call political party democracy. So it is the political party which is elected, not the individual.
Okay, Paul, just another question really on political, on constitutional principles. Is there a difference between the people who are elected to parliament or appointed to parliament on the basis of party list, the proportional representation, and those who are directly elected by the voter? Do you make a distinction between that? And secondly, which party did ZANU-PF contest at the elections?
You are asking me
which
to
make
a
legal interpretation.
My interpretation is that we contested the MDCT, which was in effect the MDCT and various other political parties which were in an alliance. I've seen those documents, and there was an alliance agreement. So they retained their individual identities, but they contested as an alliance from the papers which I saw.
Okay.
But the electorate, yes, the electorate does. Sorry.
The tension between those who are getting into parliament through party representation, such as the party list, proportional representation on one hand, and those who are elected directly. Don't you see a difference between those two categories?
There is no difference, because fundamentally, if you look at the ballot paper, the political party it comes first. The political party, then the candidates. So you cannot just be a candidate. If you want to be an independent, then you do not have to subscribe to a political party. But in fact, your right to contest an election is signed for by the Secretary General of your political party. He must sign. Yes, they must sign a document to say we've agreed that this person contests the election as our representative. Without that signature, you cannot represent ZANU-PF.
Is there something else you want to add?
So you have been sponsored by a political party.
Is there something you want to add before I move on to the discussions in 1 minute? Anything else you want to, that's burning in your mind, you want to put on the table?
Basically, I would want the listeners to understand, the viewers and listeners to understand that we have what is called political party democracy in Zimbabwe. And that is what they approved when the constitution was approved. If we want to move away from political party democracy to direct representation, where the member of parliament is representing the electorate on his own, then we will have to make a fundamental constitutional change. But what we agreed to in our constitution is that the basis of representation in parliament is indirect. You are represented by a political party. But we also accept that if you do not want to be represented through a political party, you can stand as an independent. So that for those who want direct representation, then they choose independence. Those who want indirect representation, then they choose a political party. And I think the people should understand this. This is a fundamental constitutional position. If the population want us to change, then we have to make a constitutional change.
Paul, someone is asking, what section of the Constitution are you relying on to assert the primacy of the party in elections? Which section of the Constitution?
In fact, it's not a section of the Constitution. Our constitutional democracy is based on political party representation. If you have to read the whole Constitution rather than to say section so and so says you are being represented through a political party. Our practice in our constitutional democracy is based. This is why you are fielded by a political party.
Okay.
Read the Electoral Act again.
Thanks, Paul. Let me move to Chipo. We have heard the panelists. I now ask you to comment.
So
three minutes. Yes.
As a political science professor, I think this is very worrying. I think law schools need to encourage people to take basic political science classes. Just to piggyback, Honorable Mangwana, you're absolutely wrong. There is nothing called political party democracy. What in fact you're trying to explain is representative democracy, in which individuals vote for an individual to then go and represent them in parliament. Now, this is not about the political party being a factor in a democracy. In Zimbabwe, individuals vote for an individual who happens to be a member of a political party, but both you and Mr. Mwonzora are wrong in that what you're assuming is that we have something called a party list democracy. Now, party list election, we don't have a party list election. If we had that, then the system would function fundamentally different to how it works right now. Right? In Zimbabwe, individuals select first at primary elections within political parties, and then from primary elections, they go on to a general election. So both parties have primary elections, and then you go to a general election where individuals then make their selection. Now, to Mr. Mwonzora, my first question for you is then, who does the individual in parliament represent, right? A member of parliament must represent a constituency through which they were given the mandate to speak on behalf of. So the individuals that have now been selected by the new MDC TT, who do they represent in parliament? And to go back to your argument of what was done by Tsvangirai and other leaders over time, and Mr. Magaisa said the same thing, or Dr. Magaisa said the same thing. What this alludes to is that since the inception of the new constitution, we've had constant violations of the constitution by all the political parties. And the reason I say this is because a constitution, right, it's supposed to regulate a relationship between the governors and the governed. But if you're constantly having political parties play, chess on their own without the governed, then you violated what the Constitution fundamentally represents, which is to represent the governed. And right now, in this entire conversation, the people for whom the Constitution was created have not been represented, right? The voters have not been represented. And so that's where we have to ask ourselves, who do parliamentarians represent? And can those represented by that individual recognize them, right? So if that person was to go back to the people, will the people say that we have given you the right, the legitimacy to represent us? It's one thing for political parties to engage in conversations about legalese, when legalese itself is violated constantly. And this is what you've all alluded to, that Tsvangirai did this, and in that case, Tsvangirai violated the Constitution. We've seen multiple cases of the Constitution being violated in Zimbabwe, the land reform being another example, right? It went back to property ownership that was constantly violated in action. So the Constitution says one thing, but what the Constitution is speaking of is on behalf of the voter, of the general public. The Constitution doesn't serve politicians, which is what this conversation is saying. You're all alluding to the fact that you think that the Constitution saves political parties and that it serves the elite. It doesn't serve the elite. It serves the people. So where are the people? That's my question to all of you. Where are the people in this conversation? Have the people given their mandate, their authority to Thokozani Kupe and Co, to Chamisa and Co, to say, these new people that you're selecting, they represent us? Because fundamentally, and I have to keep repeating this, that fundamentally, the Constitution is about the people. It is about the voter. It is about the governed. And the governed are not in this conversation at all. What we have is legalese. What we have is people playing around with words and sections. But you've completely forgotten that the mandate to govern comes from the people. So if the people that Kupe has replaced MDCT alliance with, if they go to the various constituencies, can those people in the constituencies recognize them and say, look, I give you the right to speak for me. I give you the right to represent me. And then the other problem with what Mr. Mwonzora has said, in fact, with what all of you have said then, is that if the MDC alliance was the party on the ballot, then in fact people voted for the MDC alliance. You see, then we get ourselves into various entanglements with the way that politics has happened in Zimbabwe. So I really want to pause there and ask each of you to bring back the voter and explain where the relationship with the Constitution and the recalls exist for the voter.
Thanks, Chipo. You really brought a new dimension to the debate. And not surprising coming as you do from the field of political science, our field. Thanks, Chipo. Brian Kagoro. Brian.
Yeah, okay. Doc, we are now engaged in a serious game of smokes and mirrors. Let me deal with Mr. Mangwana. He's easier to deal with because Chipo has dealt with. My brother, I'm afraid, as a constitutional lawyer, myself, your understanding of constitutional law is flawed. And Chipo has explained. But Section 117, because you asked for a section, is very clear on where the legislative authority reposits in Zimbabwe. It reposits with the people. And to that, I'll add Chipo's other points. Let me come to Mr. Mwonzora. My brother Dagi, let me start with the smallest of issues. Dagi, you are wrong and almost misleading. Let me explain. The internet is awash with videos of you standing to be president of something called MDC Alliance. And then you stepping down for Chamisa. And then you going to something called a Congress in Gweru and contesting. Fact number one. Fact number two. Madame Thokozani Kupe formed a thing called MDCT. Elected officials in a Congress of this thing called MDCT stood for an election against the coalition or party, or whatever you want to call it, that you, Mwonzora, were representing or competed for the election under. Now, let me say why I say that's a small point. They are on the MDCT constitution that you saw cited suggests that a member ceases to be a member under the following circumstances. Section 510, Section 511, Section 512. Let me explain. Number one, you cease to be a member if you join or support a political party other than the MDC. When you went to Gweru to a Congress and stood, did you violate Section 510? If you didn't, then the people you are recalling have not. When Madame Coupe formed a thing called MDCT, did she become, as you suggested, automatically expelled from the MDC? Notwithstanding the circumstances that motivated her to form it. Section 511, if you escape Section 510, Section 511 of the MDC Constitution suggests that a member ceases to be a member if 2/3 of the National Council rules that this person no longer represents, right? And however, when you go the National Council route, the person has to be notified in writing and the grounds have to be clear, or if it's disciplinary action, the person has the right of appeal according to Section 512 of the MDC Constitution. Now, the expulsions have to be endorsed by Congress. It seems to me that it doesn't matter which official you take of the MDCT, if you are saying there's an original MDCT. Your 5-year mandate had expired by the time you were purporting to write letters, all of you, to expel people or to recall people. When your mandate has expired and no Congress has taken place, what is the legal position? Those were the small matters. Now let's go back to what I believed were the legal arguments that you were making. Number one, that people ceased to be, that the recall. So the recall can only become legal. I'm not even talking about legitimacy, because Dr. Magaisa, Chipo, and Ko have talked about legitimacy. If, according to section that you cited of the Constitution, the member has ceased to belong to the political party of which he or she was a member when elected to parliament, and the political party concerned, by written notice to the Speaker or the President. Now, having given you the situation of Madame Coupe, if your arguments are correct, then when Madame Coupe formed her MDCT, she automatically terminated her membership of the MDCT that you purport to represent. Which would then bring me, when you stood against Nelson Chamisa, or with Nelson Chamisa, wanting to be elected first as president, and then as, I think, Secretary General or something, of the MDC Alliance Party, the thing that you are accusing these people you are recalling of having joined. You yourself, Mr. Mwonzora, would have violated section 510 of the MDC's constitution, which says a member, your membership is automatically terminated when you join or support a political party other than the MDC. Clearly, we're the festival of absurdities. This game of smokes and mirrors seeks to undermine democratic sovereignty. In the absence of a mechanism of recall, and in the absence of a proper hearing by an executive which has mandate that has not yet expired in terms of its own constitution, what we are witnessing, Dr. Mandaza, is a festival of illegalities by people claiming constitutionalism. The premise of any parliamentary democracy or any democracy, especially legislative authority, is clearly stated in section 117 of the Zimbabwean Constitution, that the authority reposits with the people. And as Chipo has said, the people have not been brought into this conversation. Let's assume that we're all wrong and Mangwana is right, and the authority reposited in the political party. Then everybody who's purporting to act on behalf of the so-called MDCT is guilty of violation of section 510 of their own constitution, because there is video and other evidence of their attempt to support, if you say MDC Alliance is another party, an election, and another political party other than MDCT. I am dismayed by the lack of honesty in this matter. Everybody has violated the constitution, but I would want us as honest Zimbabweans to say what is going on and unpack it for what it is. It's nothing constitutional, nothing legal, nothing legitimate.
Thanks, Brian. I'd like to welcome Thuli to what Brian calls the festival of absurdities, the festival of illegalities. Thuli, welcome, my dear sister.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, colleagues. I think all colleagues have made some valid points to a certain extent. However, there has to be some point where we all agree. Where I come from, again, is back to the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. The question we have to ask is whether what happened is democratic. And not just in form, but in substance as well. We also have to ask ourselves in terms of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, Article 3.7 emphasizes the importance of people participation. And I do agree with our colleague Chipua and the last colleague who just spoke now, and that we can't leave the people out. So with due respect, I disagree with the colleague who said it's all about parties. Democracy is about the people. Demos, kratos, it's a combined Greek word, people's power. And everything that we do is for the people. It's the government of the people, for the people, by the people. The whole idea is to have representative democracy. In fact, once you're in parliament, you're supposed to represent everyone, including the people who didn't elect you. However, I do agree with some of the colleagues that have spoken that it's a little bit more complex. It doesn't mean that the party has no hold over you, which takes us to the point that you raised yourself, Dr. Madaza, about is there a difference between a PR system and a constituency system? The answer is yes. When it's constituency, there's direct accountability to the people. It really doesn't make sense that you would recall a person who has been elected by the people. Why have a people rely on this person if this person can be replaced a day later? Because that really would be defrauding the people, because then you could give people somebody that is popular, and then they think, oh my God, this person is going to improve our quality of life. And then 2 weeks later, you replace this person with your own person. And therefore, the idea is, I agree with, I think it was colleague Alex, who said that the intention of the Constitution is not to create a theater for absurdities. And that's the truth with any constitution. If this matter were to go to the Constitutional Court of South Africa or the defunct SADC Court, they would take a purposive and contextual interpretation of this situation, and they would ask themselves, regarding what happened, is it in line with the domestic constitution? Is it also in line with this country's obligations under SADC instruments, Africa's shared values, and instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? And I don't believe that this action would be found to be in line with the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, particularly Article 3, 7, and 8. 7 on participation, 8 on fairness and transparency. I do also agree with the suggestion that was made by, I think it was Dr. Alex Magaisa, that perhaps the Constitution, perhaps a law should clarify this. Because just in ending, dear colleagues, whatever happens should not just be just, it should be seen to be just. And all of these instruments are there to regulate relationships between human beings. And if the people feel that there's unfairness, if the people feel that there's no accountability to them and there's no representation for them, that becomes a recipe for lack of trust in democratic institutions, and the rule of law flies out of the window. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks very much. Very refreshing. Of course, I'll give all the panelists and the discussants time to wrap up at the end. I have so many hands up, and I have to move to the participants. But before I do that, I really want to warn our viewers and our participants, those out there. There's loads of homophobic comments, vile language. Please, this is a professional forum. We'll respect each other, including those who are participating. Please desist from such language. Let's keep it civil. Let's keep it civilized. So, the questioners, I think Tendai Dumbuchena, are you nearby? Tendai Dumbuchena? Tendai? Tendai is not there. Mbazo. Who else, Robert? Moyo?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, most of my
yourself,
questions
please.
were been answered by. Okay, it's Moyo. Moyo.
Carry on, Moyo. Carry on.
Okay, yes. Most of my questions has been answered by
Robert.
Yes, by Kagoro and Chipo. I think I wanted to ask Mwonzora that why is he saying MDC alliance is a pact of political parties, but he did go and contest in I think it was 2019 Congress, and he was also candidate in that, and he also campaigned in the 2018 elections supporting the Chamisa as the president and also other MPs and stuff. He was very instrumental in the campaigning, and he also campaigned for the Congress. So why is he now turning back and also supporting Dr. Kupe, who formed his own party as MDC-T, away from the MDC-T that was Tsvangirai's one? So I wanted to ask that question, but I think it was addressed. So I think he will answer those questions.
Thanks, Omar. I'll have Shadrach. Shadrach, you're not there? Magonya? That Magonya? Who's next?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to mute my video for the purpose of enhancing clarity. I have to make an observation, and
Unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for Honorable, for Senator Mwonzora. I want to know from him, had it been that he won the Congress elections, would we have left the MDC alliance? And also, now that I hear Jacob Mafume has won the mayoral elections, would you accept that he have actually lost? People are in support of MDC alliance.
Okay. Next one, please. Blessing.
Hello,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that is Blessing.
Yes, it's Blessing. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. In all this, don't you think we are not forgetting how we ended up here? Because from where I stand, I would want some clarification going back when Advocate Chamisa grabbed power from Thokozani Kupe. Was it constitutional? If it wasn't constitutional, then what should have been the remedy going forward? Or we can just put that under the carpet, forget about it, and we say move on. Because I understand we are addressing the current situation, which from where I stand, it only passes blame to the people who are, according to Mr. Magaisa and Chipo, who are currently violating the Constitution. But what about those who started this whole fiasco, had Advocate Chamisa not grabbed the power unconstitutionally, were we going to be here, and what should be the remedy going forward?
Thank you.
Walter, please come in. After Walter, I'll have Shumba, then Brian, then Marshall, in that order. Please be on standby. I'm waiting for Walter. If Walter is not ready, Walter.
Hello, I'm ready. Yeah, I was muted.
Okay, come in.
Yeah, my question is to Brian, Alex, and Professor Tully. I just wanted to check on the previous precedents in South Africa where President Mbeki was recalled. Then subsequently, President Zuma was also recalled. Did the ANC went back to the electorate to ask the people to say, can we recall the president? Because the president was voted by the people on the ANC party card. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have Shumba. Shumba, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ibo.
Some of our women to come in, please. I'm going to defer to women callers.
Thank you, Ibo. Thank you for the opportunity, Ibo.
Welcome.
Thank you. My question is to Douglas Mwonzora and team. At the end of the day, it's not all about political parties, it's about the people. Did they go back to the people to ask if we should recall the parliamentarians that were voted in by the people? Because you cannot talk of the constitution and that you are actually violating yourself, then you bring it back to the people and saying, no, we are following the constitution. At the end of the day, you are not following what the people want. So at the end of the day, it's about what the people want. That's my point.
Thanks, Walter. Shumba, I mean. Brian? Brian? The other Brian, not our Brian.
Yes,
Brian?
yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. My question is for Brian. I think we all agree that, as you rightfully put it to us, that there was lack of honesty. Everyone has violated the Constitution, and you said nothing is legitimate. On that basis, how do you envisage that we can, all political parties at play here, can forge a way forward? We know that the level playing field is not right and was never right. How do we map a way forward in your own perspective? Thank you.
Dorcas, please. Dorcas. Welcome, Dorcas. I can see you. Unmute yourself. Dorcas, go ahead. Dorcas, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Wonderful. Chipo makes a strong point about the population and the everyday person. And I think Alex's arguments are always anchored to the people. Could you tell us how can the average Zimbabwean, all of us, become more educated and more knowledgeable on our constitution? Because we have to anchor our knowledge and our votes to the constitution. I'm just wondering how Anago Gokumusha, an everyday woman, a young person, can become much more informed about their rights, so that we all challenge this on a knowledgeable basis.
Yes, thank you. Elaine there? Elaine is gone. I'll have Marshall, and then Tatenda, then lastly Wacha. Tatenda, are you there? Tatenda?
Yes.
Yes, come in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question to Douglas Mwonzora. Concerning what happened today, I think somebody is actually asked about it, but I want to re-emphasize about it. We have seen that Jacob has won the election as a mayor. What is the position to Douglas Mwonzora since this guy is openly affiliated to Nelson Chamisa? Is he going to recall him again so that he can replace him again, like what they did to Gomba? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Watcher? Watcher, are you there? Watcher no longer there? I'm gonna start back to front. I'm gonna start with Tuli to answer questions and to sum up and end up with the first speaker, Alex Magaisa. So, can you hear me? Tuli, welcome.
Thank you, Dalkin. Thank you for the question. What a wonderful question. Firstly, two wrongs don't make a right. Assuming South Africa had gotten it wrong, it doesn't mean that Zimbabwe has to get it right. Assuming some of the political parties got it wrong previously, it doesn't mean we have to get it wrong right now. We are the intelligentsia of our countries. We are in this boat that is called Africa. If it sinks, we're going down. And ancient wisdom has always been about those who have eyes should see for those who don't have eyes. And we have an opportunity to understand our constitutions, not just in terms of the letter of the Constitution, but also the spirit of the Constitution. And clearly, these constitutions are about putting the demos, which is the people, at the center of the kratos, which is power. And anything that deviates from that is going to create lack of trust or a trust deficit and instability. Now, going back to the issue of and direct elections. President Mbeki was never elected by us. No president in democratic South Africa has ever been elected by us, the people. And hence we're calling for electoral reform, where as the people we can elect the president and insulate him from having daggers and threats from his party that threaten him with possible recall, particularly when he acts decisively against his own party members. And President Zuma was elected via proportional representation, and so was President Mbeki. What happens in South Africa is that we elect a party, and these parties have no more than 2 million people. The ANC is about 1.2 million, EFF about 2 million. And then these parties elect a president for 59 million people in parliament. And of course, they can also ask that president to resign on his own accord or have a vote of no confidence against him. But again, the numbers would threaten any president and he can resign on his own. Just again, my parting words to all of you, dear colleagues, is thank you for the privilege to participate in this. We have an opportunity in crises such as this to think better about how do we implement the instruments that we created. And constitutions do not cover all bases, but we can interpret them constructively, purposefully, and contextually to achieve stability and to put people at the center of our democracies. Thank you.
Oh, that's powerful, Tuli, most powerful. And thank you very much. It's something to savor, really. I mean, and a lesson in comparative constitutionalism, Professor Dendere. Brian Kagoro, there are a number of questions to you, and of course, can you sum up as well? Brian Kagoro.
I'm trying to unmute myself. Thank you, Dr. Bandaza. Just as Tuli has said, the subtle difference between South Africa and Zimbabwe is that the president of South Africa is elected by the National Assembly, but there's a requirement in South African law that such a president must show that they have the support of the majority of parliamentarians. When the party which is the majority in parliament through its NAC recalls a president, it doesn't necessarily mean that they cease to be president. There still needs to be that parliamentary process. Our president is not elected by the parliament. So I think Tuli has explained that. If you ask me what the way forward is, I think we are so skilled, or rather we've been playing in what I characterize, Dr. Mandaza, as the Premier League of pettiness. A lot of what's happening with these recalls is childish, petty politics, vindictiveness, and it really doesn't matter when this festival of illegalities started. And this is not a political beauty pageant. We're not in a political beauty pageantry to determine whether the Mwonzora faction, the Chamisa faction, or so and so, which one is correct. No. We're simply saying the country requires a law on the recall of MPs that will set out the procedures for recalling MPs and the requirements that each political party must satisfy when it purports to recall MPs. That's number one. Number two, I think for my colleagues within the opposition, this bloodletting, this hanging on to little technical legal niceties is not what the country requires. If we are going to have political parties play a developmental role in Zimbabwe, it is important that those political parties be developed, be mature in process and in approach, and not consume time in a country where 7.5 million people are facing hunger and the entire population is facing COVID-19 on these little games of decapitating the capacity for effective representation during the time of COVID. It would appear to me that if you want a commission of inquiry into how Chamisa became president of the MDC and whether this recalls, well, go and have that. But when the people voted, they were not mistaken about who they wanted to be a member of parliament. So if you're going to remove that member of parliament, you cannot impose another person without going back to the people, right? Or at least complying with some of these internal requirements that I have said. That said, Dr. Mandaza, I think you brought us here to discuss principles. And the principles are something has gone fundamentally wrong with our politics. National interest is often sacrificed by clever arguments to win, to consolidate, to conquer political power. And I really don't care at this moment. My brother Mwonzora and others know my position on this, that in the absence of dialogue within the opposition itself, in the absence of dialogue across all political parties on constructing an effective response by a united people to COVID, to our economic malaise, and all the other challenges we face. Dr. Mandaza, I fear we have grown men playing dolly house. And it is sad. Grown men and grown women playing dolly house. Maumbwe, amandlwane. And we just need to get out of this nonsense and focus on the importance of the business before us. Nobody owes Zimbabwe a living. No one owes us a meal. If we're to fix our country, let's start off by dealing with things that are important and serious. And constitutionalism is no joking matter of point scoring.
Thanks, Brian. Characteristically sharp, strong. Always a pleasure to have you, Brian. My young professor, Chipo. Another bite, Chipo.
I want to end by saying that, on a more positive note, to Honorable Mwonzora, Honorable Mangwana and and Dr. Magaisa, although I don't think Dr. Magaisa would consider himself a politician. And to say that I think you as politicians are doing what you're supposed to do for your political parties, right? So in a democracy, part of the job of politicians is to speak up for your political parties. And in that sense, I don't want us to come out as though this is an attack on your person, but a recognition that you're doing what you're supposed to do for your political parties. But the way that democracy works and constitutions work, and I think this is where the Zimbabwean population has been missing in the conversation, that we assume that once a constitution has been drafted and it's been passed, that this document can survive on its own without the support of people. But constitutions, as Professor Thuli Madonsela has already said, they also depend on our interpretation based on context. And what we've seen is that the context of the past continues to create this environment that allows for constitutional abuse. And on one hand, that's a reflection of a citizenry that has not been educated on their rights, right? On their right to engage in the conversation. So that's important. And then one of my favorite American politicians, I want to say this, Madison said this, that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, then neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by man over man, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and then in the next place, oblige it to control itself. And so this is why we find ourselves in this complication where those that are in power of governing right now, whether it's MDC under Chamisa or MDC under Kupe or ZANU-PF, they have taken the power unto themselves and they have forgotten that this is a continuing conversation with the people, right? That in order to govern a democracy, we must continue to have a conversation. And the conversation must say, are these decisions that we're making the right ones? Do people agree with these decisions? And then to someone's very important question on how do we make the citizenry aware of the Constitution? You know, I think in our public school education, in our universities, people must be required to take Zimbabwean Politics 101 or Constitutionalism 101, because our rights are held within the Constitution, but the Constitution cannot function in a vacuum. It cannot function on itself. And I'll pause there.
Thanks, Chipo. Thanks. Excellent as usual. Thank you very much. Paul Mangwana. There were some questions to you, Paul, but also your wrap up. Unmute yourself, Paul.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're on now.
We adopted the principle of representative democracy. A president, I'll give you an example of a president who is directly elected by the people. That president can be removed from the office by parliament. Parliament, which is elected through various means. So we do not go to the people again to say, you are the ones who elected the president into office. Now we are not happy with the president, or if the people think that they are not happy with the president, we ask the people to hold a referendum as to whether the president should continue or not. We go to parliament, which is deemed to be representing the people. And the people and parliament can recall a president who is directly elected by the people. I'm giving this as an example, just to emphasize the point that the type of democracy we are enjoying in our country in terms of our constitution is representative democracy. In the same manner, when a member of parliament is contesting an election, they are sponsored by a political party. You will not be allowed to contest an election on the basis of a political party ticket without the signature of the Secretary General of that political party. Why do we have that provision? So that there is confirmation that the policies we are going to be debating and putting in place in parliament are the policies and ideologies of that political party which is sponsoring you. That is the basis for the existence of that provision, where if the political party which is sponsored you tells the speaker that this member of parliament is no longer representing our interests, it must have the power to recall you. And when they recall you, a by-election if you are representing a constituency, will be held. And you are free to contest as an independent. And so you are not taking away the right of the electorate again in expressing their views. If they feel that the political party, and there are quite a number of examples where political parties actually withdrew their support from a candidate, and that candidate went on to contest an election and won the election as an independent. We've quite a number of instances which have taken place in our democratic history. So we are not that provision does not take away the right of the constituents to choose a representative whom they want. So in my closing remarks, I'm saying the Constitution is okay. The Constitution as it is all right. We adopted representation through political parties. Therefore, the political party has a right to confirm as to whether or not a representative is still representing its interests. If it's not representing their interests, then they recall that person. And the right to recall is important for us to continue to have political parties having a say, a measurement as to whether the representatives in parliament are still representing their interests. Because at the end of the day, come the conclusion of 5 years, if we allow members of parliament to represent their own interests when they are in parliament, that political party will not be able to retain power.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much for coming to the debate. Thank you indeed. We'll meet again soon. Douglas Mwonzora. Douglas Tejara.
Thank you very much. I would want to thank everybody who has directed their questions to me. I want to address the two professors, Professor Denere and Professor Mwonzora. Thank you very much for your comments, but there is one point that I want to make clear. Are we discussing law, constitution, or are we discussing morality? We are discussing law. What does the law say? What does the Constitution say? Does the Constitution of Zimbabwe provide for recalls? Does the Constitution of South Africa provide for recalls? Yes, they provide for recalls. President Jacob Zuma, addressing the Honorable Mwonzora, President Jacob Zuma survived 7 votes of no confidence in the parliament. The ANC had not gone to the people, to the generality of the South Africans, the 59 million, to say we are about to pass a vote of no confidence. They acted as a party. President Mbeki was removed, was recalled by the ANC. It was not preceded by a referendum of the South African people. So was President Zuma. It is the same principles that apply. Now, I want to answer the question by Professor Denere about where the people are. Where is the voter? Let's remember that the voter in this country voted for a constitution in a referendum in 2013. That constitution provides for political rights. It provides for formation of political parties as agents of the people. And that same constitution goes on to give the political powers of recall. And to Professor Denere, let me again correct you there. Zimbabwe does have a party list system. This is what we call proportional representation, where a party provides a list of people to be elected either into Senate or into the National Assembly as part of the women's quota. And those people are chosen by a political party. And when it comes to recall, they are recalled by that political party that chose them. They are replaced by that political party that recalled them. That is what the law says. When it comes to the people who are directly elected by the electorate, the law gives the political party the power of recall, and that person is subjected back to the electorate, and the electorate can vote for that person or not for that person. So they are not completely prejudiced. So there is involvement of the people. I want to go to my brother Brian, and I want to say thank you very much for what you have said, and it was very passionate. But you betrayed one thing, my brother. You did not research. And I want to demonstrate to you, my brother, and you can check this. The Congress that was held in Guero, The Congress in which I unsuccessfully contested the post of Secretary General was not an MDC Alliance Congress. It was an MDC Changirai Congress. How do you know that, Brian? You go to the resolutions of that Congress. You will see, and you can Google them. It is they are entitled Resolutions of the 50th Congress of the MDC. And again, it was called the 50th Congress. And if it was the Congress of the MDC Alliance, it should have been the first Congress. In the same year, 2019, in September or October, I think 14 October, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the MDC. It couldn't have been the MDC Alliance because the MDC Alliance was barely a year old. So again, you did not look at facts, my brother. And I want to refer you to go to the Twitter handle of Nelson Chamisa between end of February 2019 to end of June 2019. You will see Chamisa there telling people about the MDC Congress. And if you go to the election material for Welshman Nube, Charlton Nwende, and so on, their campaign posters, they are campaigning for the MDC. If you go to the resolutions read by Tabita Kumalo, she refers to the MDC and not the MDC Alliance. The MDC Alliance, that is why also at the same Congress, we welcomed back into the party, Welshman Nube and Tendai Biti. We couldn't have welcomed back people who were forming a party, who we were forming a party with. They were coming back from to the MDC.
Let's sum up, Tejara, please.
So the point I'm making is that everything that was done, it was done above board. That is what the law says. That is what the constitution of the MDC says. We in the MDC want to take over governmental power through peaceful, democratic, and constitutional means. And one of the starting points is that we must respect our constitution to the letter, no matter how inconvenient it may be to certain people, no matter how it may have prejudiced our friends. We have recalled people because they did not belong to our political parties. Some of the people we recalled is because they are fingered in corruption. Some of them are facing 17 counts of corruption, and we have recalled them in line with our stance against corruption.
Thank you, Tejara. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating in this. Thank you. It was good to have you. I'll have Alex Magaisa. Alex, unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've listened very patiently to the submissions that have been made by my colleagues, and I want to thank them for a very civilized discussion that we had today. I just wanted to say to Nkomapo Mangwana that in fact, political parties do go to the people when it suits them. In 2017, during the coup, ZANU-PF went to the people, it corralled people, fooled people into believing that they were participating in the removal of President Robert Mugabe. And unfortunately, that right to demonstration is no longer allowed in this new so-called Second Republic. The point about a party list that Nkoma Dagi has made reference to is very interesting, because you would have to ask that when people went to ZEC in 2018 to submit the party list, which party submitted the party list? To my understanding, it would have been the MDC Alliance, ZANU-PF, MDCT, led by Dr. Kupe, and those are the positions that were taken in allocating those party lists. But that's a technical point. I don't want to get too much into all those things. I just want to conclude in summing up that the issue that we face is an ethical issue. Senator Mwonzora wants to say it's about the law, legal, its constitution, and so forth. Fair enough. But what Chipo was saying, what Tuli was saying, what Brian has been saying, all these guys, is that there is a danger in taking a very legalistic approach to issues that concern the lives of the people, that it is politics, that in this politics, there are also ethics. When I started, I said all parties are to blame. I said the MDCT is to blame, the MDC Alliance is to blame, the ZANU-PF is to blame, because they have all used this provision in a manner that is vindictive, in a manner that tries to uphold their own political position at the expense of those who oppose them. And I thought that that was going to set out the context of this discussion. But to my surprise, it looks to me like some of us came here to defend ourselves as opposed to discussing issues of principle. And I thought that we were going to round on those issues, focus on what our democracy should be, how things should be. So the discussion should never have been about what is, but it should also have been what ought to be. What are the issues that we should, what are the standards that we should aspire to have? Is it right for us to say that the party is supreme at the expense of the people? Should we not be going back to the people? Should we not be setting up a law that allows for democratic representation of the people in the process of RIGO? I thought that those were the kind of discussions that we were going to have, as opposed to I'm right, they are wrong, because that doesn't take us anywhere. Finally, Dr. Mandaza, it's an issue of public trust. As politicians, as intellectuals, as activists, and as people who are concerned with our respective countries in our countries, we must always consider, is what we are doing relevant in terms of the people? Is what we are doing sufficient to maintain public trust in politics? If you ask the average Zimbabwean today, they are very disillusioned. They are disillusioned by the political process because it's a political process that has become exclusionary. It's a political process that is privileging the elites, a few people who consider them to be leaders of political parties, to make decisions on their behalf, not only to recall their MPs, but also to impose their own people. What ethics are there when you go out there and take someone who lost an election and lost that election dismally, and you say that that person is coming back into parliament to become an MP for that constituency, for that province, to even become the leader of the opposition in parliament? It doesn't make sense. It is an assault on public trust. And these are the reasons why people begin to leave and stop engaging in politics. We have so many young people today who say, why should I go and vote in 2023 when my vote is not going to make any difference, when someone is going to change the decision and bring someone else that I rejected to become my MP? I want to conclude by saying that in politics, as in law, it's not just about written rules. The written constitution that we have is a great document. It has its weaknesses. But constitutions on their own do not resolve issues. Even a country like the United States of America with a 200-year-old constitution, even the United Kingdom with a constitution that goes back centuries, there are certain unwritten rules of the game that politicians abide by, that politicians and the people abide by. Rules like respect for the other person, rules like forbearance. Forbearance means a very simple thing. You have power, but you don't have to use it. So even if the Supreme Court had given the MDCT power and say that you are now the opposition party, the MDCT could have exercised forbearance and said, well, we don't have to do that. Likewise, in 2015, the MDC led by President Tsvangirai at the time did not have to recall those MPs who had chosen to go and form another party. They could have exercised forbearance. Likewise with ZANU-PF. What I'm saying is that in dealing with our political system, let's not just focus on what we see as the rules in black and white. Let us also consider the values, those unwritten rules that govern relations between politicians and the people. I conclude there.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks. Well, who can ignore those compelling concluding remarks? The issue of public trust, ethics. There is morality in politics. There can be morality in politics. And I think that the debate, although you're a bit depressed about the focus on legalities and constitutional issues, I think the debate helped us to raise those very issues of public trust, the issue of morality, national interest, Brian called it, above all else. And also democracy, as Tuli has emphasized. Demo comes from the Greek word, democracy comes from the Greek word of demo, the people, the primacy of the people. And I think if anything that has emerged in this discussion is the extent to which as Brian calls it, the festival of absurdities and the illegalities, is the extent to which I realized through this very educational session that we have forgotten the people almost entirely. And I think the point made earlier by Alex himself, we need to look at the Constitution again, but also the point made by Tuli in the reference to the African Charter. We have very imperfect constitutions, let alone democratic principles. And I think the Zimbabwean experience so far, and even the discussion to some extent, it really made us, made a sense of guilt that we really, the people are nowhere to be seen in this discourse. And I think that there are many, the comments coming from people on this is to emphasize again and again that the first past the post in our constitution, electoral law, really is and always has been emphasis on the voter. And I think the recall of parliament, in my view, and in summing up the debate, is really an assault on not only the constitution but on democracy in particular. We will continue in this conversation. The next debate is beyond this burning issue of land, the land question in Zimbabwe, the unresolved land question. So join us again in 2 weeks' time when we look at the land question and the implications thereof for the pursuit of a settlement in our country, which I think remains the agenda of this series. Again, to thank you all, Alex, Tejara, Mwonzora, my young man, Paul, my young Professor Chipo, our guru, Brian, and above all, my sister, Tuli, coming as she did and gracing our forum. A reminder that really in Southern Africa, we're just one country, one big country. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, thank you. Good night. Music, Robert.